Hi, my name is Melissa Dowland and I'm the coordinator of teacher education for the North Carolina Museum of Natural Sciences. Today we're going to explore one of the most amazing organisms that lives on this planet, and that is trees. Trees can live for hundreds of years and even thousands of years. The oldest living tree on Earth is in California. It's a bristlecone pine and it's more than 5,000 years old. Here in North Carolina, we have the 5th oldest tree in the world, a bald cypress tree along the Black River in eastern North Carolina that's more than 2,600 years old. Trees are amazing in so many ways. They turn carbon dioxide that we exhale into oxygen that we need to breathe. They help to stabilize slopes, they provide shade, reduce temperatures. They really are an amazing organism. There are even some recent scientific studies leading people to believe that they may even communicate with each other. They have a network of symbiotic fungi that lives with their roots in the ground, and between the trees, that fungi might be able to spread nutrients from one to another, which is a pretty amazing thing. And there's even some evidence to suggest that trees may communicate through scents in the air. When one is being eaten by caterpillars, it puts off a scent that indicates to other trees in the area that maybe they should make their leaves less tasty to caterpillars to protect themselves. I'm out here in my yard with one of my very favorite trees. It's one of the largest in my yard, and it's also one of the coolest looking. It has different bark than this type of tree normally has, which is one of my favorite things about it. I want to start here though to introduce you to some of the different things you might be able to observe about the trees in your yard. First of all, when you think about a tree, one of the things we think of right off the bat is leaves. And each species of tree has a different shape and type of leaf. Now with a tree this large, it might be hard to get your hands on a leaf. So I brought my binoculars out here because they can be a great tool to help you get an idea of what the leaves of a tree look like by looking up into the canopy to see its leaves. And then if you're lucky, once you know what you're looking for, you might just find some of its leaves on the ground. And that would be a great way to be able to explore what the leaves of a larger tree look like. I'm also fortunate with my tree, it happens to have a few leaves sprouting out of the trunk. Now again, this is kind of unusual for this tree. It's a slightly strange one, but sometimes you might be able to find low branches or leaves that are coming out of the trunk that would be able to help you get a leaf to look at more closely. Sometimes leaves have a really distinctive shape, like the leaves from my tree. Looks kind of like, I don't know, a cat face or a flower, perhaps. On a tree that has more normal shaped leaves, you might want to just pay attention to some characteristics like, is it skinnier at the tip, or maybe it's wider at its base? Is it a leaf that is heart-shaped at the bottom with a point like this? Another characteristic of trees that you can pay attention to is what kind of bark it has. The bark on my tree, as I mentioned, is unusual for this species, but if I were to try to describe it, I would describe it as very ridgy and almost woven. Some trees have much smoother bark, other trees have peely bark, so bark is another characteristic to pay close attention to. Another thing to look for on your tree is its flowers or fruit. Now again, this is such a large tree that I had to go searching around to find an example of a flower on the ground nearby. And this is one of the flowers from my tree. I know because I've looked up at the top of my tree with binoculars and I've seen these flowers hanging out up there, and there's a bunch of them scattered on the ground underneath my tree. Similarly, at a different time of the year, you might find the fruit from your tree on the ground, an acorn if it's an oak tree, or a hickory nut if it's a hickory tree. And so again, trees have distinctive types of flowers and fruits that could help you identify them. Another characteristic you can pay attention to on a tree is what the twigs look like. Now, I can't really do that with my big tree here. The twigs are really high up in the air, and I can get an idea with binoculars, but they're hard to look at. This other tree here right next to me though, when I look at it, I notice that its twigs are really thin and fragile, almost lacy looking. Other trees in my yard have really stout twigs, or even twigs that zigzag. And on the twigs, there are buds and leaf scars from the growth of leaves in previous years and the growth to come in the future. That's the buds. So as a quick summary of some of the tree features we've looked at so far, things that you might want to pay attention to observe, and then perhaps to help you identify are the leaves of the tree, the bark of the tree, the flowers or fruit, and the twigs. But since they're such an iconic characteristic of a tree, let's spend some time taking a closer look at the leaves. We'll start out by talking about leaf shape, and that's basically what the outside edge of the leaf is doing. The first leaf shape is entire, and that is when the outside edge of the leaf is smooth, like in the swamp dogwood and eastern redbud pictured here. The second leaf shape is toothed, and that is when the edge of a leaf is jagged, like the hop hornbeam and American beech pictured here. The hop hornbeam is actually pretty interesting. It would be considered doubly toothed or doubly serrated. You can actually see if you take a close look that there's some larger serrations and then some smaller serrations in between the larger ones. A third leaf shape is lobed, and that's when there are sinuses in the leaf, which is kind of the parts that are missing, leaving lobes of leaf divided from one another. And you can see that in the white oak and the sweet gum pictured here. They kind of look like fingers of leaf separated by spaces. Lobed leaves can have a smooth or entire edge, or they can have a toothed edge like the sweet gum. So in the case of the sweet gum, you might be able to say that it is both toothed and lobed. The final type of leaf shape we'll talk about is divided, and that is when a leaf is divided into multiple leaflets, and then the leaf stem with those leaflets on it is attached to the twig. This can be a little tricky to figure out, so we're going to take a closer look at that in our next step as we talk about leaf type. So there's two leaf types, simple leaves and compound leaves. Simple leaves are the ones that are not divided. So the eastern redbud and black cherry pictured here, you have your leaf stalk, and it's attached to a twig. Compound leaves are the divided leaves. They're the ones that have multiple leaflets attached to each leaf stalk. This can be a little tricky to determine sometimes, because even on a compound leaf, there can seem to be a little bit of stalk on the leaflet. One way to tell is that the leaf is always attached to the twig. And so wherever you find the woody twig and you see a stem, that is the beginning of the leaf. But even that can be hard to tell, especially in the spring, when a lot of the new growth of twigs is actually green and looks very much like a leaf stem. Another thing you can look for is buds. There are no buds where leaflets meet the leaf stem, but there should be small buds developing where the stem meets the twig. They might be fairly small, especially in the spring, but there should be a developing bud where the leaf meets the twig. The next leaf characteristic we'll talk about is leaf arrangement. There are two main types of leaf arrangement, opposite and alternate. As you can see in the mocked up pictures here, for trees with opposite leaves, they come out on opposite sides of the twig. There's only a few groups of trees that have opposite leaves, so it can be helpful just to remember which ones those are. And those are maples, dogwoods, ashes, and buckeyes. Now don't be fooled, there's also some shrubs that have opposite leaves, but those are the major groups of trees that you can start with if you have a tree that has opposite leaves. Alternate leaves are when those leaves don't come out opposite each other. They alternate up the twig. Back to our simple versus compound leaves, keep in mind that when we're talking about leaf arrangement, it refers to the entire compound leaf, not just the leaflets. So in the example shown here, the white ash, the leaflets are opposite each other, but that's not what really matters. The leaves are also opposite each other. In the picture on the right, those are two leaf stems joining the green growth of the new twig, and they are coming out opposite each other. So for ash, the leaf arrangement is opposite. In a counter example here, this is mockernut hickory. So again, the leaflets would make you think that this has opposite leaves. But when you look at where the leaves, the whole leaves, the stem of the leaf actually attaches to the twig, they actually come out alternating. In the close-up here of that twig, you get a better sense of that. They're still kind of gathered down at the end of the twig because again, this is new spring growth, but they are alternating where they come out of the twig. You can also see the pattern of the leaf scars. They're kind of the heart-shaped light brown markings along the twigs. And the fact that those are also alternating up the twig helps you know that this is an alternate tree. The final leaf characteristic we'll talk about is the vein arrangement. And this is just how the veins are organized on the leaf. Again, there's two major kinds of vein arrangement, pinnate and palmate. On a pinnate leaf, you have one major vein that runs the length of the leaf. Then there's smaller veins branching off of it, and they look kind of like a feather. Palmate is when you have 3 to 7 major veins all stemming from the same point, usually at the base of the leaf. And you can remember that if you look at your hand. You have 5 fingers all branching off of the same point on your hand. And so palmate, like the palm of your hand, is a leaf that has those branching veins coming out of the same point. If we take this a step further, we can apply the vein arrangement words pinnate and palmate to compound leaves as well. In the example of the white ash, it is pinnately compound, because again, you have one major vein in the middle and then branching coming off of that one. The red buckeye leaf, on the other hand, is palmately compound. Those leaflets are all coming off from that one point at the center. And then, this is where it gets really crazy, you can even have bipinnately compound leaves, or in fact, tripinnately compound leaves. On the right is mimosa, which is bipinnately compound. You have the main stem with smaller stems branching off of that, and then tiny leaflets branching off of those secondary stems. That makes it bipinnately compound. Let's walk through some observations of this tree that's growing in my front yard. So first of all, I pulled off a leaf to take a closer look at. These leaves are simple leaves. They're attached directly to the twig, although the buds that should be at the very base of the leaf stem are really hard to see on this tree right now because it's springtime and they haven't developed much yet. I would need a magnifier to see them. These leaves are toothed along the edge, so that's what the margin looks like. It's a simple leaf, it's toothed. The leaves are coming off the stem in an alternating pattern. They're not opposite each other. And the veins in the leaf, there's one major vein down the middle and then a bunch of veins coming off the side of it, so it's a pinnate leaf. Other characteristics I can pay attention to with this tree are that the bark is really smooth and gray, and it's covered with a lot of different lichens, which is a symbiotic relationship between a fungus and an algae, and it's growing like a crust on the bark of the tree. Also, this tree, I notice, has branches coming out all the way up and down the trunk, which is nice when I want to look at leaves because there's leaves low down on the tree. And the twigs on this tree are pretty skinny and thin. I don't see any buds right now because, again, it's springtime, and so there's not a whole lot of buds growing on this tree right now. It's still putting all its effort into growing leaves. In paying attention to my tree, I noticed something really cool. There's a moth right here on the bark of the tree that blends in so well with the tree bark and the lichen that's growing on it. The closer you look at a tree, the more likely you are to find really neat things that are living on it or in it or feeding on it or taking advantage of it in some other way. This is another of my favorite trees out in the woods behind my house. It's another really big tulip poplar tree that raccoons like to live in. Trees are such an amazing and important part of the ecosystem. I hope you've enjoyed exploring the trees in my backyard with me. Now I hope you'll go out and check out the trees in your backyard or neighborhood.